Okay, now turn to December 07. Okay, alright, so that's another 30 markers. Your question 1 case study. Now this part we're going to see to do with purchases and inventory. Page 9, I think. Page 9. Okay. Now straight away they ask over here that they want 6 audit procedure that the auditor would normally carry out on the purchases system. So to audit purchases at DIN C and explain the reason for your procedure. Now it's a 12 marks requirement, so it's quite well understood is 1 mark each. Now they only want 6, so you don't go and write your answer as a small thing. Don't write cast the what casting, then just use as one procedure, then better not. Okay, so try to make it more solid. Okay, now then B, list 4 audit procedure that auditor would normally perform prior to attending your premises on the day of the inventory count. Now that means we are asking for audit procedure before stock take. Now stock take got 3 parts: before, during, after. Can you see that? Okay. Now we're asking for 4 things you do before you attend. Okay. Now then part C, they give another part to do with weaknesses of control. Okay. Now they say on the day of the inventory count, you attended the depot 9 and so on. Now we read this later. They want us to list the weaknesses in the control system during the inventory count. So what's wrong with the inventory count procedure? And for each of these weaknesses, explain why it is a weakness. That means you're going to tell me the consequence. That's why you say why it is a weakness. And state how weakness could be overcome. Okay, so there's another part. So we have this 3 marks, 9 marks. Okay, so that's the main part. Okay, we read the question. Now DIN C assembles fridges, microwave, washing machine, and other similar domestic appliances from parts procured from a large number of suppliers. As part of the interim audit work 2 weeks prior to the company's year end, you are now testing procurement and purchases system and attend the inventory count. Now these are interim before the year end. So when you write your answer, you cannot write answer like cut off test, because you know. So example, you cannot use cut off test, because cut off is only meant for those at the year end. Follow? Okay. Now parts inventory is monitored by the store's manager. When the quantity of a particular part falls below the reorder level, an email is sent to the procurement department detailing the part required and the quantity to order. Now a copy of the email is filed on the store's manager's computer. So now they're telling you the process, which is very important. Okay. Now the staff in the procurement department check the email, so they don't call purchase department. The question use procurement. So when you write the answer, don't start telling me purchase department, then we don't know which department you're saying. Okay. Now the procurement department will check the email, allocate the order to an authorized supplier, and send the order to the supplier using electronic data interchange. Now, a copy of the electronic data interchange order is filed in the order database by the computer system. And the order is identified by unique order number. Okay, when goods are received at Din Z, the store's clerk confirms that the inventory agrees to the delivery note and checks that the order database to ensure inventory were in fact ordered by Din Z. And delivery is refused where goods do not have the delivery note. Now, the order in the database is updated to confirm receipt of goods, and that the perpetual inventory system is updated to show the receipt of inventory. Now, the physical goods are added to the part store, and the paper delivery note is stamped with the order number and is filed in the goods inward department. Now, suppliers send a purchase invoice to Din Z using EDI. Invoices are automatically routed to the accounts department. Now, on the receipt of the invoice, the accounts clerk checks the order database, matches the invoice with the database, and updates the database to confirm receipt of the invoice. The invoice is added to purchases database, where purchases daybook, supplier's individual account in the payables ledger are automatically updated. Now, see, they're telling you the audit trail. Now, you see, one thing very important that when you audit things from income statement, okay, if you need to audit anything from income statement, the main class of transaction, you must know the audit trail, which is usually given in the case study. Now, why is it so that when you audit things for balance sheet, the procedures are fixed? Like receivable, we tell you, confirmation, subsequent receipt is all fixed. But when you want to audit things from income statement, unfortunately, it's not fixed, because the way how they do things and the way how they process things are all different. So that's why you cannot assume that everyone uses the typical way. Understand not? So that's the reason why you must know the trail. Okay, so this is a very important technique you must remember. Okay, now, so what you need to do is you need to look back into the case study and then write down the trail so that you can see. Now, how does the procurement works? Now, it begins off with what? The email coming from the store. Correct? That's how they place an order, right? They say that the quantity of a particular part fall below the reorder level, an email is sent to the procurement department. So now the email is the beginning. Okay? Now, when we learn in the class, we teach you what? Purchase requisition. See, the practice is different. That's why you must look at the case. What we learn is only a typical system. Now, the email is then sent to the procurement department. So that's the procurement. So what will the procurement do with the email? The procurement will raise an order, right? Now, the order is an electronic data interchange order. So we have a EDI order, which actually is purchase order. But you don't use the word purchase order because the question doesn't use that word. Okay? Now, this is an electronic purchase order. So this EDI order is filed in the order database. So now there's a EDI order database. So there's a record that you file inside the database. Okay, the order is then emailed to supplier. what will happen next? The actual goods will be delivered to you, correct now? So now, after the order, actual goods are being received. Now the actual goods are being received together with what? Together with supplier's delivery note. Okay, the actual goods are being received with supplier's delivery note. Now what they will do is they will check the note and make sure that what you order and what the actual goods they send is the same. They will also check this with the EDI order database. Now if everything is in order, then they will update the EDI order database to indicate that they have received the goods. And what will happen to the paper delivery note? Now the paper delivery note is filed in the receiving department. So this delivery note is filed in the goods inward department. That means the receiving department. Okay. Now they didn't send this to the account, so you must see carefully. Okay. Now then the supplier will send you an electronic invoice. Okay, electronic invoice. That this electronic invoice will automatically goes to the accounts department. Now the accounts department will then compare this with the EDI database. Okay, now if it matches, then they will update this to the purchases daybook and the payable ledger. So if okay, then payables ledger. Now you are auditing this because end of the day you want to make sure that whatever you purchase is not materially misstated. Okay. Now the question asks for 6 procedure. So always remember we have a standard procedure. There's always an answer. Standard procedure, there's always an answer. Okay, besides standard procedure, there's another 2 answers that we can always use them in the exam. Okay, one is analytical procedure. Okay, one is analytical procedure. Now this analytical procedure, you use them unless question say substantive test, or they use an audit test. Because once they use a test, then they refer only to test of detail. Then you cannot write the answer for analytical procedure. Because you know, and when you want to write answer for analytical procedure, you must see if the case study got give you any relationship or not. Like just now, the one we try on B star, it was very, very well written that the relationship are there. So you can use it to test. You know? That's why when I write answer for the credit card company, I can use receivable date. Now, so in this case, if they didn't give anything to you, then you invent yourself. Now it's quite simple. Just give something to make a comparison. Your answer is correct. Now number 3, we can always write cut off. Okay, cut off is always one standard answer that we can write in the exam. But of course, in this case, it's not suitable because the question is asking for interim audit. Okay, now so these are quite universal answer. That every time when you write the answer, you don't know what to start, right? You start with all this. Okay, the rest of it we focus on the audit trail. Alright, now we begin off. They ask us to write down procedure and the reason. Okay, audit, procedure, and the reason. Now, you are auditing purchases. You are not auditing payable. So when you write, you must focus on purchases as your key point. So my standard procedure, number one, I should agree the amount of purchases in the income statement to the total purchases in the general ledger and the purchases daybook. Okay, now cast the purchases daybook so that we want to see the purchases for the whole year will come back to the same figure now. Okay. Now the reason is to confirm that the total purchases in the purchases daybook are completely and accurately posted to the income statement. Now, one answer already. Okay. So now I give you an example. We're going to use AP. Okay, how do you write answer for AP? Now you notice this question with the one we asked just now is a bit different. Just now the question say list the substantive AP. That means it's a very specific requirement about AP. That's why you must go straight to tell me what kind of relationship that you're going to use to make comparison. But here I'm asking you to give me audit procedure. An audit procedure include AP. So that's why in that case it will be a bit different now, because we will tell them we will use analytical procedure. So we are telling the examiner that the audit procedure include analytical procedure. But you cannot just say use analytical procedure. Then the examiner will say, what procedure is that? Can say no. So that's why you must get example. So you must write some example of what procedure is that. So give an example. Now this is what you replace. No? So in the exam, you're just going to change this part only. Now the example, if you see whether if there's anything in the case, or you just made up yourself. Okay, now anything. Okay, for instance, compare the amount of monthly purchases month-on-month basis for the current year and the prior. Follow? Now, whatever we write here is example. Understand? What I give here is example. You can write anything. Okay, you don't write compare purchases on a monthly basis also. Okay, you can say calculate the gross profit margin, all right, to see if there's any fluctuation in the margin, which may also indicate that purchases is misstated. Follow? Now, so you can just give any example to replace with this one, and after that you continue again. Then you say investigate any unusual fluctuation. Now that's another answer. What is the reason of doing this? Now, this is to rely on analytical procedure to reveal any unusual fluctuation in the purchases amount that could indicate possibility of over or understatement in your purchases. Okay, so now we have 4 more procedures left. Now the 4 more procedures left, we need to reserve them to test various assertions. Accuracy law, your occurrence law, completeness law. So these are those assertions that we need to test. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the diagram and ask ourselves that if you want to test various assertions, how do you test? Now, for example, how do you test completeness? Now, completeness is from invoices we trace to purchases daybook. That's completeness. Now, how do you test occurrence? Occurrence is purchases daybook, you go back to invoices and then go all the way back. Now, because we're only left with 4 more procedures, so you must use this so-called the audit trail and think of any 4 things that you can write. Because you know, now for example, you realize that there are certain things you can agree them differently. For instance, the invoices is recorded by making a check to the order database, but the accounts people will never be able to see the delivery note, right? Because the delivery note is maintained in the GID. So you can also do an audit test by taking samples of the invoices and compare it with the delivery note and see if they are the same. This is to make sure that everything that you're billed correctly. Yes, you know? Now all these are the things that you're going to do. So you just base back into this diagram and write down the audit test. Follow, okay? Now, so number 3. Okay. For samples of purchases in the PDB, agree them to the supplier's invoice. Okay, so go back to the invoice. Alright, now when you agree, i.e. you make sure that amount is the same. Okay, or else what do you mean by agree? Fair enough. So agree means go back and check that they are the same. Alright, now you should agree them to supplier's invoice. Then trace the invoice to the EDI order file maintained in the EDI order database, and agree the invoice with the details of the orders placed. Now, what is the purpose of us doing this? Now, you say I'm writing actually a few things inside, but I want to call this as one procedure. That means my answer is solid. Okay, there's very strong things that I write that there's a few things that, okay. Now, my whole purpose is to confirm occurrence, right? Now, this is to confirm that the purchases recorded in PDB had occurred with a valid EDI order being placed. Okay, now because the delivery note is not attached, so it's important that we must go back to the delivery note as well, because all this is your own record. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will then also agree samples of the supplier's invoices to the respective supplier's delivery note maintained in the goods inward department. Now you write in full, okay, so but you know which one I'm referring to. Now, so why are we doing that? Because we want to confirm that the invoices are for goods that Bin C has received and that Bin C is billed according to the actual goods being received. Now this is to confirm accuracy of the invoicing, okay, as well as to make sure that we actually receive the goods, which is based on the delivery note. Now, see, the system is computerized. Okay, everything is electronic. So if it's electronic, then a lot of things can be easy for us. Now we know that every time you place an order, there will be an EDI order being created, and then there will be an update being made. Okay. Now, when the update is being made, then later there will be an invoice, then there will be further accounting recording. So we can also query the database and see possibility that what if the order is being placed, but then the status was not being updated. But this could be an indication that they left out something. You see now? So what we can do is we can have an access to the order database, query the database for any EDI orders placed but not updated with the goods receipt status or the invoice receipt status. Investigate if any. Now, this is to detect possibilities of orders being placed but left out for recording. So we are detecting unrecorded purchases. Now, so far we talked about occurrence. Okay, now we talk about accuracy with the supplier's delivery note. We talk about detecting possibilities of not recording when you see the status is not being updated. Now, very important is completeness of purchases. Now, how do you test completeness of purchases? Now, completeness of purchases is you're going to start from the top, go all the way down. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to reverse. So, using samples of EDI orders that are flagged as goods have been received traced to its suppliers the end. Okay, then agree them to suppliers invoices and recording in purchases daybook. Now we just want to confirm that purchases are completely recorded. Now that's the purpose, okay, is to make sure that it's completely recorded. Okay, so that's the part to do with auditing your purchases. Now this is to show you the technique only, that if you have questions on income statement, what you got to do is to come up with the audit trail, and then you're going to see what to write. Okay, now if you don't have the audit trail, then you're going to write something very general. So if you start telling things like take purchase order, go to invoice, go to delivery note, this sort of thing is not right, because it's completely out from the case study. Follow on, okay? Now, so part B, they ask us, now what you're going to do before you attend the stock take. Now, they're asking for what you're going to do, the audit procedure. So please explain in a way that is very realistic. Okay, please explain in a way that is very realistic that what you're going to do here. So part B. Four things. First, request management of DINC to prepare its stock take plan and send to us for review. That must be the first thing, right? Then you say, I will review the plan. How do you review the plan when you have not asked them to give you the plan? Correct. So you must say, I'll ask them to prepare a plan and give it to me. Okay, number 2. Review the plan above, considering matters like, now give some example. Now what are those things you must take into account? Like counting instructions, recording on sequentially pre-numbered stock sheets using pen, adequate segregation of duty is maintained over forming of counting team. Now there are a lot of things you consider, but I cannot write so much because it's only 4 marks. Okay, so I just give you some examples. So in fact, you just have to write very briefly that you're going to review the plan. Okay, after you review the plan, then what do? We will then prepare our plan, right? Now, then we will design the audit plan for purpose of attending the inventory count, including deciding the audit personnel to assign to observe the count. Now we also need to probably pay a visit to their warehouse and see the place is conducive, because you're not. Now we can visit the warehouse to ascertain if premise is conducive for account. Now they want 4 things, I give 4 things to them. Okay, now but of course what I've written here is quite detailed. It's only 2 marks. 2 marks, so you just write briefly enough. Okay, alright, now there's 4 things that we're going to do. Okay, now part C. Okay, now part C is actually questions on evaluating weakness. Okay, it's a question on evaluating weakness. Now they ask us to evaluate weakness in the control, inventory count control. Now, but the weakness actually comes from what you learn when you learn audit of stock take. Okay, we see what they say here. Now on the day of the inventory count that you attended Depot 9 at Lindsay, you observe the following activities. Number 1, the pre-numbered count sheets were being issued to the client staff carrying the count. The count sheets show the inventory ledger balances for checking against the physical inventory. All the count staff were drawn from the inventory warehouse and they were counting in teams of 2. 3 counting teams were allocated to each area of the stores to count, although the teams were allowed to decide which pair of staff counted which inventory within each area. Staff were warned that they had to remember which inventory had been counted. Information was recorded on the count sheets in pencil, so amendment could be made easily as required. Any inventory not located on the pre-numbered inventory sheets was recorded on the separate inventory sheets, which were numbered by the staff as they used. At the end of the count, all the count sheets were collected and numeric sequence of the sheets checked, but the sheets were not signed. Well, it's very obvious, right? Okay. Now, so there are quite a number of weaknesses they have here. So in fact, these 12 marks are 3 marks for student. Okay. Now, so I need you all to identify for me the weaknesses in the procedure. Okay. You must get me at least 5. So very obvious one. Okay. Now you try and get me the weaknesses. Now we have 3 parts to answer. You have to write them as weaknesses, consequences, and recommendation. Now the first one we see from the case is which one? The first point itself, they tell us that the count sheet show the inventory ledger balance. That means they show the quantity, right? Now you cannot show quantity, right? If like that, then how do they count? Then they won't count already, right? They just follow the quantity. So this is the problem. Now just write back only. The count sheets show inventory ledger balance, i.e. the quantity of the inventory left in the store okay, so they're talking about the inventory balance. Now, so what's the problem? Counters may not count the physical inventory properly or seriously. Okay, now they might just approximate the actual quantity based on the ledger balance. Now this is the risk. Or they probably may waste time searching for inventory that they felt is missing. So all these are the problems that we see here. So what do you recommend? Very easy, right? Since you say the balance should not be there, my recommendation is the inventory count sheets must not show the inventory ledger balance. Okay, now if I follow the questions that they give the marks, they give 3 marks for weaknesses, 9 marks to explain, then I would make a wild guess. If 3 marks, how to divide the answer? Well, probably they give you 3 marks for 3 points. But I find that 3 marks for 3 points seems to be very little because the case give a lot of problems. So if that's the case, I would suggest that you better aim for 6 points, that every weakness is just half a mark, because the weakness is very straightforward from the case study. So like that is one set of answer. That means you get 2 marks. Okay, so probably is half a mark, then 1 mark and half mark, something like that. Okay, or half mark, 1 mark. Okay, depending on how the examiner allocate. Okay, so this is the first part. Okay, number 2. What's the second problem we see here? Now they say that all the count staff were drawn from the warehouse. What's the problem? There's no segregation of duty, because everyone comes from the warehouse, meaning you don't involve staff from different departments. So you only take people from the warehouse. So again, just copy the weakness that all count staff are drawn from the inventory warehouse. So consequences. Now the weakness is, this is a lack of segregation of duty. Right in full, SOD, okay? There's a lack of segregation of duty. Now, then the staff from warehouse can easily conceal whatever fraud or problems in the warehouse. Okay, example, by not reporting the missing inventory. So they know that they've stolen the goods, so when they count that time, they inflate back the figure. So this is the risk that we see. Okay, now so that's the consequence. So recommendation is what? Now obviously you must be more specific here. So you must tell them how you achieve segregation of duty. So we must say that each of the team shall comprise of one staff from the inventory warehouse and one from another department. Okay, number 3. Now moving on, they tell us that the counting teams were allocated to each area, but the teams themselves decide which area that they're going to count. Now again, that when you're going to decide yourself which area you're going to count, now maybe there are two problems. Now one problem is they might miss out one of the area, because you say we all decide ourselves. Maybe then we thought you count, I thought you thought I'll count, I thought you will count. So end up that one area is not being counted. Okay, so it's better that it's pre-assigned, that you just tell the staff you go here, you go there. Okay. Now then number 2 is again fraud, because if you decide on the area yourself, you can always go back to those areas that you know that there's a problem, so that when you go and count, you can hide the problem. Okay, so these are the 2 issues that we see here. Now number 3, yeah. Now the teams were allowed to decide which area of inventory to be counted by themselves. Now, there's risk of inventory area be left out. Okay, this is one problem. And the risk of the warehouse staff counting area that they are responsible to, and be easier for them to conceal any fraud. Now, so the suggestion is we will assign for them. Okay, so the team shall be assigned to each area of the inventory in advance by probably the manager, leader, and no team shall count an area that he is responsible to at work. Okay, so the important thing is you must not go and count back the same area of your stock. Right, so this is number 3. Okay, number 4. Now obviously this is a very obvious mistake. They say that the staff were warned that they have to remember the inventory that they have counted. Alright, now remembering is not the correct way, right? You can always forget. So this is definitely a big weakness. Now, so they mentioned that staff were warned that they had to remember which inventory had been counted. Okay, now this technique can be dangerous since staff can forget and resulting in error in the count. Now, for example, you count twice, or you thought that you've counted but you didn't count, so after that you ignore it. So this is the risk that we are having. Now, so if that's the case, we must tell them the proper way is what? Come up with the system. Like maybe we give them stickers or we give them a chalk or a marker. Okay, now so shall be briefed on how to mark stocks that were counted. Example, by providing them with stickers. So you can stick on the inventory after you've counted them. Okay. Now number 5. So if we read on, they tell us that inventory count sheets were recorded in pencil, which is another obvious mistake. The mistake is exactly the reason why they ask them to do it. They say that it's easy for them to amend, but in fact you shouldn't be amending, right? Because whatever you counted, it has to stay. I mean, if you amend, then later if anyone come and simply change a figure, you don't know who changed, because you know. So that's why you cannot be using pencil. So the recording of the count results in pencil is a weakness. Okay, now what weakness is that? This allows fraudster a good opportunity to amend the count results subsequent to the count, which is exactly what we try to prevent. Okay, so the suggestion is simple, right? That all information on count sheets shall be recorded using pen, and any changes to the count sheets must be initialed by the staff. Okay, so if you use pen, you want to change, can you sign? Okay, so this is number 5. Now just one last one, so we will finish off the 12 marks over here. Now the last part after that, they mention that any inventory sheets, any inventory not located, they were recorded using a separate sheets which were not numbered, that they can number on their own. Now that's a problem. Then in fact you go on, they also mention that the inventory count sheets were not signed. Now that's also a problem, but I think we have 6 points, which is definitely enough already. So probably in the exam you think that you don't have time to write 6 points. Sometimes you're thinking maybe I just write 5 points. You still pass, right? You still pass. Just that you don't get 90, you don't get 99 marks, but you still pass the paper. Okay. Now, so in this case, we will have the last point here. Okay, that the inventory not located on the inventory sheets are recorded on separate inventory sheets where staff numbered them as they use. Now, so it's not sequentially. So again, there's risk of these count sheets be forged, since the fraudster can remove their existing, replace with one, and numbered it himself. Okay, so you can just exchange with another one that he can give his own number. There's nothing wrong because the numbers are not pre-assigned. Now, so the solution is simple, that all the additional count sheets must be sequentially pre-numbered, and a control list is maintained to record which team has taken them. Now, so this is a way of how we can control at the end that what are the number of sheets we issue, then who has taken, so that we can keep track of it. Okay. All right. Now that's the 12 marks requirement. Now there's the last part at the back, so a very short 4 marks. Okay, so if you're done, just turn to part D. Now what they ask us in D is they say state the aim of a test of control and the aim of substantive procedure. I mean, what's the purpose of TOC and the purpose of SBL? Okay. And then in respect of the attendance of the inventory count, state one test of control and one substantive procedure that you should perform. Now I just give an example of on the day of the inventory count, what is the procedure you're going to do if it's a TOC and SP? Okay, now we can write like that, TOC. Okay, what's the aim of test of control? To prove if control is effective, right? So the aim is to test control effectiveness where auditor shall then decide whether to rely on the internal control to reduce its substantive procedure. So the whole purpose is to test control effectiveness. Now, so give an example. When you do TOC at inventory count, because we told you all before that inventory counting is also an example of internal control, alright? So what do you need to do here is to make sure that can they count properly or not. Okay, so control to them is counting the stock. Can you see or not? So the idea is the counting of stock is a control. So can they count properly? Okay, can they count properly? Now example, I can observe if the counting teams are carrying out the count according to the management's plan or instruction. Now because if they follow the plan, then they do the work properly, then the count is proper. But if you don't follow the plan, then the count is not proper, then the results is affected. Now I'm testing control. Okay, my objective is I want to know can you do it properly or not. Okay, now the next one is in terms of substantive procedure. What's the issue on substantive procedure? See, the aim of SP is what? To detect material misstatement at assertion level, in account balance, in class of transaction, as well as disclosure. That's the aim. Okay, so we want to detect misstatement, but remember, when you say misstated, you have to use assertion, because you must tell me in which way that it is misstated. Is it misstated because of accuracy? Is it misstated because of occurrence? Misstated because of valuation? So you cannot just say misstated, but misstated must be misstated in which way. So that's why you must give me assertion. Very important word. Okay, so misstatement and assertion. Follow? Now, so what are example of SP when you do inventory count? Okay, for example, I want to know if my stock quantity is counted correctly. We can do existence completeness test. Okay, existence is one important assertion we need to support. So what I'll do is I say from the stock sheets, I'll select sample of inventory and then identify them physically and agree the physical quantity with the quantity counted in the stock sheets. Now that is substantive procedure. Now why am I doing that? The purpose is confirm existence of your inventory. Okay, alright, so I've shown you samples of 2 questions. that it's all based on your question 1 case study. Okay, now if you flip through your past year, you can see that the style of how examiner asks is also like that. They will give you short cases, then they give you different areas. So most of the time they will not focus on just one area. So they will split. Like in this case, they split between purchases, inventory. Okay. Sometimes you see they ask you on top wages, at the bottom fixed asset. So this is what you must get ready, and there'll be always some theory inside. Follow? Okay. All right. So that's it lah. We stop here for today. You can take a dinner break. Come back, then we continue the class.